We're live on Facebook.
We are.
No, mute myself before I say something silly.
Alrighty. Hey, Jane Chandler and Sarah Holiday and McQuarter. I don't know you, McQuarter, but you must be good people because you logged in. So it's 6:01. Let's go ahead and start, and I'll wait for a response from Judge Don Johnson. All right, and so thank you all again for joining us. Joining me, excuse me, for this roundtable talk on rethinking policing in schools and in the broader community. Uh, Chief Murphy Paul, are you still with us? Okay. All right. So I'm doing this one specifically as a school board member, not as a candidate for any race. It's an important issue to me as a board member and personally because our discipline rates and the disparity in discipline nationally and locally is pretty alarming. And we have to do something different and better. We know from research that uh, schools with a higher percentage of low-income students tend to be uh, disciplined and more punitive rather. Take uniforms as a small example. Some schools like uniforms as a way to appear scholarly, like private schools. But it the tendency in your traditional public school is the schools that don't have the uniforms and they trust the students to dress and conform a certain way are the ones that are allowed to go to school without the uniforms. And so, it's little things like that that sometimes you overlook. And so, with that, I'm going to let each of my guests share a little bit about who they are, and then we'll get a little deeper into the subject matter. And we'll go in ABC order, for the sake of, being fair and all of that stuff. And so then that would put us with Brother Hicks since as our first. Dr. Hicks. Wait, unmute yourself. Okay, I'm gonna unmute you. Oh,
I
okay.
got it. Uh-huh. So good. Spoken. So I'm going to put in my microphone. I'm a Dr. Joe Hicks. I'm a public health practitioner. So that means I'm interested in clean water and wear your helmets when you're riding your bike and seat belts and no smoking. But today, violence is a public health problem that we're seeing, and policing is not using the, the best methodology that we've found in public health. And this can be integrated into the current policing philosophy and practice using public health models that add community health and policing practices. And so this is a really important issue that we can we can model here in Baton Rouge. We have the money, we have the political will, we have the history that says that we need to do this. And so it satisfies a number of issues. Um, and so my background then, of course, comes from a public health and a medical background, as well as working for the state and the Department of Health. And so we understand how to take big municipalities and big organizations and make a policy change. We want to make a policy change that changes the practice, especially the practice of institutional racism. So we know how to do that, and we want to offer some solutions and some safe discussion today on this difficult issue. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that intro. And so then now we'll go next to Chief Murphy Paul.
Chief Murphy.
I'm Chief Paul. I've been in this position about 2.5 years as the police here in Baton Rouge. And I agree, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. One of the things that we set out to do when I was blessed with the opportunity was to realize that as a leader and as a professional, we're not always just the smartest ones in the room. And that we are better off engaging the community and everybody and getting ideas and recommendations from the community, from experts, different stakeholders, because, like, I get it, crime is a social economic issue. But oftentimes, these departments and even specifically chiefs of police have become the low-hanging fruits, have been politicized. That's why the average chief of police is less than 4 years, because it's easy to blame a law enforcement, but the reality is that there's so many other institutions that play a role. We got to be honest about, from a historical perspective, the role we as law enforcement have played in community police relations, in the systems that Dr. Hicks talked about, systems that have negatively impacted specifically communities of color because of our practices. And we're listening. We have a chief advisory council, so that's recommendations. We have a mayor that's actively listening now and understand. I think she really has a holistic approach to this issue of crime in economics and education and family values and all of those things that play into this current state that we're in. So I'm excited to just listen and take back some takeaways that so we can be better at our craft.
All right, Brother Taylor.
Thanks for having me on, Dawn. I really appreciate it. My name's Jamal Taylor. I'm a certified good troublemaker. I have a BA from Southern University, an MAT from the University of Louisiana at Lafayette in special education, and an EDM from Columbia University in education leadership. But I do specialize in making good trouble, the best kind of good trouble. I'm glad to be on, and I will tell you I'm probably the least politically correct person on the call tonight. And so be prepared, because I'm gonna say what I'm thinking. Chief, pull your toes back. I promise I'm not talking about you, but if I am and it hurts, good, fix it. I would say to you that policing in this state is an absolute travesty. And where I think about policing in relation to our schools, I don't even think we can get that far, because we have things that have happened and occurred in the states over the last 17 and 18 months where Trayford Pellerin was shot 10 times in the back, a Black man with supposed knife in his hand, which we all have not seen the evidence of because we don't release body cam footage. Or Mr. Ronald Green, whose mother I consoled and talked to at an event here recently where we did a press conference on the steps of the state capitol, whose son was murdered by police. And for 17 months, state police hid and covered up a murder. And when it did come down and the officer was finally, the state trooper was finally going to be arrested, he drove his car off a cliff and killed himself. And so we certainly have some major issues with policing in this state. And I think it rises to the highest levels of our ability to engage thoughtfully in a conversation that's transparent and not give excuses to people. I don't think that there are bad chiefs of police. I'm certain that there are some. I think that we have a bad system of policing that disproportionately impacts people of color, particularly Black men and women. And the conversation is always, it isn't the right time. Well, my question is always, when is the right time? And I believe the right time is now, and we have the momentum to move ourselves forward collectively in a way that positively changes the community. So I would commend Chief Murphy for his work in Baton Rouge and changing the culture. All right, when a patient has cancer, the chemo isn't good and it doesn't happen over a day.
Thank you, Brother Taylor. Sister Wright.
Good evening, and thank you for having me on. I'm the educator of the group, I would think, the elementary educator, should I say. Again, my name is Rosalind Wright. I am the principal of Park Forest Creative Sciences and Arts Magnet. I was in private school for 6 years. I've been in public school for 19. In part of that public school education, I have been 10 of those years were done with the drug, alcohol, and violence prevention program. And that taught me a lot. It taught me a lot when it comes to policing. It taught me a lot when it comes to violence prevention and how we can work together, not just with the community members, but with families to help with recognizing how our students begin in violent tendency. They begin with those violent tendencies, even in elementary school. I am a restorative practitioner. What that means is that I believe in building and maintaining relationships in order to allow families and communities and everybody to understand that we have to work together in order to fix some of the things that's wrong, not just within our school system, not just when it comes to discipline, but even in our community. So I'm here as the elementary educator, and I look forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. So let's dive into first some of what you were talking about in your introduction of yourself, Rosalind, and Jamal, rethinking policing and school sites, student management, including restorative justice. And since you just finished talking, if you could continue talking in that regard. And also, since you're a District 4 school, I'm aware that, you know, during your tenure, things have changed in terms of data as it relates to once you begin to implement restorative practices on the campus with students as well as teachers. So please feel free to share what specifically is going on and is amazing over there at Park Forest Elementary Creative Sciences and Art Magnet in District 4. Thank you very much.
Yes, we have an awesome program going on at Park Forest. I got to Park Forest in December of 2017 as the principal. When I walked in, I was immediately told, and you were part of that conversation, Dawn, just that there had been a revolving door of administrators at the school. I came in with the thought process that the children needed normalcy. They needed some cohesiveness at the school because it was quite a few people in and out. And so coming in, being a restorative practitioner, I walk in looking at data. So I walked in looking at the discipline data, and the discipline data was alarming to me. So what I saw was a number of referrals, suspensions, and expulsions for for some years. And it was a pattern of low test scores, high suspension, high expulsion. Now, I'm a firm believer that in order to get higher test scores, children have to be in class. If I'm suspending them every time they have a uniform violation or every time something happens, how are they going to learn? When will they have the time to learn if they're always suspended? So looking at the data, I realized it had to be something better we could do. Being that restorative practitioner, I started with just training my leadership team. My leadership team, my assistant principal, we had to become restorative with each other. I was new to them. They didn't know me. They had to learn to trust me. Once I believe they learned to trust me, they learned to trust in what I was giving them, what I was saying about restorative, and how we needed to build those relationships with not just our students and our teachers, but our families as well. Because if mama don't trust you, if she does not trust you, she's not going to trust you with her baby and trust you in understanding that what you're saying is for their best interest. So we started off with just the leadership team. And in that first year, in the first semester, should I say, in 2017, our school data, our discipline data dropped dramatically. So that same year, however, when we looked at our scores improved dramatically. So we went up, I believe, right at about 6.2 points or something in our school performance score, but it was because children were at school as opposed to being suspended. So the following year, of course, we had to double down. So now we had a whole training in restorative practices for the staff.
Wait, and if I could just, on the data piece. So to be clear, it wasn't just that your numbers went down because you told the teachers you can't send them to the office no more. It was that, just elaborate just a little bit on that.
I had to be the restorative person. It had to start with the top. It had to start with me listening to teachers, building the relationship with the teachers where they felt that they were being heard. They felt that they could come to me, they could talk to me. I could talk to them. I could show them in small pieces, in bite-sized chunks, what can we do to help this child? One at a time, what can we do just to help this child? If this is an habitual offender, what can we do with this habitual offender to help them to see what they could do differently in their behavior? And we started with one kid at a time, but it took the teachers' trust in me. They had to believe in what I was saying. They had to believe in restorative practices themselves. But because I was able to be a restorative leader, they became restorative teachers. And that was prior to them even getting the training to understand that what I was doing with them was exactly what I needed them to do with the students. So that summer, of course, we had a huge restorative training for our staff, and they actually learned what it meant to be a restorative practitioner. They learned what it meant to build a trust with the parent. They learned what it meant to build a trust with students. I never told a teacher, you cannot send a student to the office. I never told a teacher, don't write them up, ever. I said, talk to the student, find out why they did what they did. Ask them what happened. Ask them what were they thinking when whatever occurred happened. You need to find out, talk to them. Many times you will find out the root of the problem just by giving children an opportunity to talk to you, building that trust. And that's what we did. So the teachers did that the following year, and our discipline data numbers and the district, I share this with the district as often as I can. My discipline data went down again. And when I say it went down again, I'm looking at, I went from I think February of 2017, there were 64 suspensions. And in February of the following year, it may have been 12 suspensions. Okay. So you see, we started to bring all of our numbers, our discipline numbers down. But by the same token, our scores again went up. Okay. So we ended up, I think, growing another 6 or 7 points, and our school performance score is now a C. So we are constantly moving forward because we have not only teachers who trust leadership, we have parents who now trust teachers. We have students who believe that they can come in and talk to us. So discipline, I didn't even have a TOR, the timeout room. I barely had a timeout room last year because we talked to kids. We call mom and say, hey mom, let's talk about it. What can we do here at the school? Tell me, what do you do at home?
Not come get your baby because I'm tired.
And my parents will tell you, instead of saying, come get your baby, the response is, come on, let's have a discussion. What can we do as a school to support you and your baby? And once we figure out how to support them, we do that. And the reason I do it is because we know that the earlier children begin to get suspended and expelled from school, it just increases the likelihood that they won't graduate, that they will go into the penal institutions. So we're looking at trying to keep them in school and out of trouble at starting early. We have to start that somewhere, and I think it needs to start as early as possible. So I would like to say, I came into restorative practices from a different angle. So what I didn't say when I introduced myself, and Dawn knows this, but I'm also an attorney. So I came from restorative practices through the restorative justice side. And as I researched restorative justice, I saw that there was a piece that was missing. And as I looked for that piece, I found restorative practices, which is the school's response to restorative justice, which I'm a practitioner. I've been in it since 2000. 12, 13, and I believe it works. And that's what's been working at Park Forest. And I just pray that other schools, which we are trying to get more schools
Yes.
and restorative practices.
We pushing it out to 24 schools this year.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that. And just real quickly, before Brother Jamal speaks, just real quickly, Sister Wright, tell me about how it also impacted your teachers, your turnover rate, your absenteeism.
Yes. So the first 2 years we looked at our teacher, I'm going to go with teacher absenteeism because I looked at the data with that and it was pretty high prior to me getting there. The first 2 years, my teacher absenteeism rate was very low. We had 96% of our teachers at school all the time working with their children. Student absenteeism went down tremendously. Parents began to trust us. My first 2 years, my first full year, I had no teacher turnover. No one left. No one got on the transfer list. Teachers were saying to me, we love it here, but we love it because now we have relationships. And those relationships were with parents. Those relationships are with our students. And now they talk to us. Parents talk to us. So the teachers at my school, most of them, they remain at my school. I don't have a high teacher turnover because I try to be that leader that I want from my supervisor. So I try to give that to them as well. And I hope that that's what I.
Thank you for sharing that. And Brother Jamal, your specialty is not necessarily restorative practices, but I know you have some insight on discipline and suspension and classroom management and things of that nature.
Absolutely. So I was a director of student support services and culture in Atlanta when I was there. I work as a special education specialist now. And so when we think about the term discipline in our education system, I think about it through a different lens. I think that as we deal with students with needs that are unique and different and manifestations of behavior that look differently, that no matter what we in our normal brains try to conceptualize as the fix for it will not fix it, right? I think that we too frequently in education work on fixing students rather than finding workarounds. And so I think of our education through that lens. As it relates particularly to education though, I think that we have, and we'll say, I think that across this country, we see a disproportionate number of children of color that are negatively impacted in our school systems. And I think that that is largely based on the fact that we speak about our kids as if they were adults. And I'll use the bus incident from this past week. I put something on Facebook and I said, why in the hell is this child in handcuffs and why is there a picture of it floating around social media? It's a child. And then I hear from people start calling my phone. They're like, we tried to get the child help. The child has been struggling. We're looking for some help. And so I think the way that we look at our students differs in this country. And so I'm going to look at it from the lens of like how we engage students that are Black versus how we look at their peers that are not. And I'll give you a couple of examples, right?
Okay.
We have charter schools in New Orleans where students are obligated to cross their fingers when they want to go to the bathroom and raise their finger up if they want to go and sharpen a pencil, and they're made to sit in the desk and be quiet and not move and not speak and go and eat in the cafeteria as if they're in the penitentiary. However, the people that operate many of those charter schools send their children to Montessori schools where they're allowed to be free thinkers and go do things on their own. They don't ask. And so our system is set up for children that look like you and I to not do as well and to be thought just kind of robotic and rule following robots. I mean, like it's just hard to describe that. We have so much trouble at our schools in the inner city, but if we don't look at the root of it, which is we disproportionately educate children that are Black differently than we educate children that are white. New Orleans is a prime incubator example for that. You still have the problems in those schools. The resources are not going to the students. They're still getting suspended. Large violence at the schools in that city. and a group of people that are making a significant amount of money. We have people that make at charter schools $200,000 or $300,000 a year.
For how many schools? A couple of them, to oversee a couple of them.
Schools. And we have school board members that facilitate this monetization of our children. We have school board members across the state that look like you and I even, and that's the worst of them, that will sell us down the river for a charter school network and a job.
While screaming is the next civil rights movement.
That's right, because
we saving Black babies while we making money.
Because we're getting paid for it. I mean, and it is unfortunate, and they will hide behind this righteous indignation. And so I value when I hear people like Principal Wright speaking, because that's the way that we truly change our schools. The other thing that we must realize is, because some person that works at Harvard or Yale wrote some neat book about this new procedure, that we shouldn't change what we're doing next year, 2 years later, 3 years from then, because that's what happens in education. For those of us that have been in the classroom, we realize this ever-changing shift on how we're going to fix the issue of our children in our schools. And those books are not written by people that look like us. And I'm not trying to be I don't believe anything anybody says unless they're Black, but what I'm saying is we're not listening to Black voices when we make decisions about Black children, and the people that we're talking about are violent in our communities. That's not that discussion. I'll use an example of Miss Wright. I don't want to step on your toes, but I'm going to use an example of probably the lawyer in you that came out, but you used the term habitual offender, right? Like our children, and I don't think you meant that intently, but I think that that's how the system has engaged us in identifying our kids, that they're habitual offender, habitually offends the rules and violate school policies. And when the truth is, we haven't provided families with the resources they need to engage their needs. Our children are going to sleep hungry. Our communities are policed by bad police officers. That's not a dig at you, Chief Murphy. But our police officers in our community antagonize rather than support. And so I think when we think about this idea of policing and the connection to our school system, the thought that I always have is that our children frequently get the short end of the stick and their behavior is criminalized. Had the person that took that bus been a non-Black student, they would have said, oh my God, look, that child, something must be wrong with them. Something must be up. Who left the keys in that bus?
So something must be up, or
you broke up for a little.
Little Skipper taking a joyride in the bus. Now he could have hurt somebody, but come on now, little Skipper, you know better, right? I mean, all the I kind of got sick to my stomach when I looked at all of the charges. Like every charge you could think of on this, and then he was such a small, or is such a small baby. And I do owe a sister a phone call who's a parent with a sped child who called me about the issue and had more info. Sister Coranda Corley, one of our rock star community members at board meetings. I'll call back because she has some more information on that particular situation that I want to be a help if I can. So thank you, Brother Taylor. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I would just say to you that I think that is the illness in our school systems related to policing, and I just want to commend again Principal Wright for her work in engaging our children, and your work, Dawn, in engaging our children as they are children. Not in the legal perspective of that, put it on your legal mind, Principal Wright, notwithstanding the facts. If there was no fob in that bus for the bus to start, the child would have never started the bus. So the person who left the vehicle unattended needs to be charged in as well for facilitating the crime that they're charging the child with, because they acted in a fashion or in a manner that aided and abetted him taking the bus, I would think, right? And I'm just being facetious there, but if they had never left the keys in the bus would never have been driven.
That's facts. That's facts. All right, Chief. I don't know what happened to Brother Don Johnson. Sister Sarah Holiday, one of the attendees, said she was going to give him a call for us. Give us an update if you hear from him, Sister Sarah. We'll move on to the next, and that's like rethinking policing from a law enforcement perspective. So let us hear what you have to say, Chief. Wait. You're on mute. Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's
You
all
have
right.
you have a specific question you want me to answer, or you just want me to talk about?
I know that is, just from one-on-one dialogue when I see you out and about. I know that it's very important to you to try and reshape the culture of the department. I've even heard you use language, and you didn't necessarily frame it as restorative practice, as Principal Wright mentioned, but I have heard you use language that indicated to me, and I don't want to put words into your mouth, but it indicated to me that you were trying to, uh, approach things in a way in which you help your officers grow, individuals. And so then how does that type of thing translate into community engagement practices, anything around that foundation work, that foundation that was just started with the partnership between BRPD, the Constable's Office, the Sheriff's Office, and LSU and Southern. That's a pretty new project that was just launched last week, I think. So things of that nature.
So, I listened to Brother Taylor and others. Let me say this. If I thought they were all bad police officers, I would be in. Let me be clear about that. We got great men and women who wear the uniform, who go out there, who put their lives on the line every day, who are public service. Okay. I do understand from being in this business, retired from state police, now being blessed with the chief of police, that we as a profession may not have grown at the rate where there were signs, signals, and indicators telling us years ago that those changes should have been taking place. And that's not unique to law enforcement. A change is not always embraced. Now I look at it like when I look at my iPhone, I don't mean to compare it to that, but I remember when I first heard my iPhone, I thought it was okay. And every year there was improvements and improvements, and somebody looked back and now his iPhone something, and it continued to evolve and grow. And I don't think we've done that in law enforcement as a whole. I don't think we looked at, okay, society has changed, community expectations have changed, and we haven't embraced that in a way when there were incidents, and I'm thinking of it from a national standpoint that told us we got it right many years ago, or we should have looked at this practice. And now what has happened, like I've seen before in my career, that doesn't, it's kind of like systems and training. I heard it, like I can't comment on what was mentioned earlier on the baby that was driving the bus, because as you well know, it's an open investigation, and there are some things that I'm aware of that I want to be respectful of that because of its age and other things. So I'm not going to comment on it. So, I hope that no one asks me any questions about the incident. I can't answer. But I do have some historical knowledge on that. But I also think that there are patterns and practices that we have been engaged in that we're not always, aware of the bigger picture from a historical perspective on how we trained. I think how Mr. Taylor said how we looked at certain communities, those biases and implicit and that have gotten us to where we're at. But I think what's happening in America right now there's something different about policing today. And I think George Floyd, because it was such a horrible event that was shocking to the conscious. And I believe the reason why we're seeing cities and states all across America actually changing legislation that some were screaming should have been changed 10, 15 years ago, changing practices, looking at policing through a different lens. I think in some cases you have leaders who are in positions saying, yeah, we've been trying to get this and it's hard because of the culture changes. And then you have some that are being forced to do it because of what's going on now. But I think the reality is the reason why it's getting the movement that it's getting now is not necessarily because folks who have had family members that lived in communities that have been witnessed and by what we call generational trauma, trauma that I may have experienced or a relative and listening to my father and my grandfather and my uncle and my aunt. And you see this, and sometimes the experience may not be the individuals, but the experience has been a loved one experience. So you share in that trauma or that fear that we hear when we say, just somebody ran from the police, he had to do something. Nah, that doesn't mean he did anything wrong. So, the procedure justice training that is mandatory now in the police department, that all our police officers are required to go through. Every police officer in academy goes through. It talks about that. It talks about the history. It talks about those implicit biases. It talks about the different cultures and why we react the way we react. And it requires us to look at ourselves as an organization, but as individuals as well, to see what role we play in that. And when we recognize those biases or that we may have, on a person, or even a specific community, an area of the city, how do we check that, right, and not allow that to play into our decision making and enforcement. And we are now, and look, they're very uncomfortable conversations, and it's not just here in Baton Rouge, it's happening all across America. And yes, it's happening more today because of George Floyd, period. But those conversations are uncomfortable in there, and some get it, some don't. But we have to have those conversations. We got to get to a place, and I think Dr. Hicks talked about it, where we have to look at a to crime as a whole. And when you look at the mayor's initiative, her a safe and hopeful and healthy Baton Rouge, kind of takes that approach, a public health approach to addressing crime. But we live in a society where we want change overnight, and you're not going to change a culture overnight. Not going to happen. It takes time.
Now let me ask you this. You mentioned that, because I'll hear people say that the training for police officers needs to change, and they'll mention stuff like cultural awareness and sensitivity training and etc. But you're saying that is already taking place.
Just started.
I'm asking. I want to make sure I understand. That is already.
So, I mean, it depends on the area. I can speak for the Baton Rouge Police Department. When we look at where we are now with our training, that work started before I got here. Okay, it actually started. It began under our president, Mayor President Sharon Weston Brown. She began implementing changes in the department. So when I came here, that movement had already begun, and I was able to step in. Go ahead.
So, all right. So you're teaching me something new. So So the change, that particular change is relatively new in terms of the whole culture of the BRPD, that particular change.
Yes, so she came in and she looked at accountability. I remember when we first talked, when I first got in, and she talked about moving us forward with the 21st century policing. And that was something she had studied. And I kind of used that as a basis, going through the process, because I'll speak on it. So my whole plan and strategy coming in was based on that.
Okay.
So there's the de-escalation training. But I think the key what you have to look at is in training, it's not just a training, you have to put it in policy. Just because I train you to do something, I have to have policies in place to enforce when you are not responding to that training, or when your behavior is not consistent with the training. So I can train you all day. The teeth is in the policies. And then you have to look at the culture. Policy for breakfast. I'm going to tell you that. But you have to make sure there's accountability in place. And the accountability has been in place from the de-escalation training. We looked at it like, okay, there's de-escalation training in our use of force, there's de-escalation training in our use of force course, there's de-escalation training as part of our fair and impartial policing course, as well as in our procedural justice course. But then when we talk about other things like officers must give verbal warning, you have to put that in your use of deadly force policy, not just the training piece. When we say officers cannot use force before trying to de-escalate situations, you have to put that in your less than lethal force policy. You have to put it in your training. So when you start looking at all of the different courses you have and you're trying to change this behavior, you say, okay, when we teach this, we have to put it here now, right? De-escalation, use of force, procedural justice course, very important. All of that is part of our de-escalation in specific situations. So, the police can't use chokehold. That was put in, or strangleholds. Police can't shoot at moving vehicles. It's in policy, not just the training. Then there's the mandatory intervention, where you are mandated by policy and we train you that when I see someone else doing something, then I'm not only required to stop the behavior and step in. Policy say I have to report it, whether someone else sees it or not. When we talk about the mandatory intervention to stop fellow officers from using excessive force, it's in training, it's in less lethal force policy, it's in our de-escalation training, we teach it in our use of force training, we teach it in our procedural justice course training, and we teach that in our fair and impartial policy, our policing training. The requirement for the comprehensive reporting is part of that. The use of force continuum, the body camera program. Where now body camera program has mandatory supervisory reviews quarterly. It also requires documentation, and anytime we have an investigation, we have an internal affairs policy where we go back 6 months on body camera footage and we do audits to see if we have any patterns of behavior. That's mandatory. We put our body camera policy online. You can see it online. It's available online. And we have a site for our body camera program that can be accessed. But, there's still room for improvement. When we look at our intervention, our early intervention program, where we actually now have systems in place that we're really giving it teeth, where we are looking at certain triggers when certain things happen, from use of force incidents to pursuits, to abusive leave, complaints. All of those things will trigger a mandatory intervention with oversight from our internal affairs division, so that we don't have those type of incidents with employees. But sometimes you got good police, they've had a bad day, or maybe going through something in their personal life. Our police officers suffer from the same emotional things and stress and anxiety that everybody else goes through. And we want them to be healthy. And so we monitor that now. We made it safer for police officers to say, you know what, I need help. I'm going through something, chief. I can't police today. And
I'm not laughing at you. Jamal's smiling and I'm smiling. But I appreciate what you're saying. And I'm gonna say this, and I don't really mean it and because I was smiling, it's gonna sound like I'm joking, but I'm not, okay?
Mhm.
So I am in my, middle age, being somebody that overworks. I love, it's part of my nature, and I love going all the time. I can't keep still, but you reach middle age, you realize you have to do some self-care, and you have to be very deliberate about it. And so,
See,
all right, okay, all right. So, and I was going to ask, I know, self-care and mindfulness and mental health is trending in general, but is it something that's also trending in police, law enforcement culture?
Yeah, so, we were the recipients of a collective healing grant. And what that grant did is and we also, our recast grant through the mayor's office. I think both of those grants, when you realize, they recognize that there was a lot of trauma in the Baton Rouge community, from the Alton Sterling incident, the protests surrounding that, to the shooting of our police officers, to the Great Flood. And all of those incidents happened in such a short period of time that it created a lot of trauma. We had police officers who lost their houses, and they still had to police from the Great Flood, losing our heroes who were killed, and those police officers, and they still had to police. And all of that trauma that our police officers were going through, and we work in a profession where we're not, where the environment or the culture is not one where we're saying, hey, I'm suffering from some type of mental illness. I'm going through depression, which is more common than people want to admit. But that we're going through significant emotional events. So the collective healing grant helped us with that. Southern University did the community on it. LSU, the law enforcement piece, and we partnered with NAACP 100 Black Men, Baton Rouge area, I believe, Human Services, and collectively, they collected this data, presented information, and some which have led to policy changes within the department, the creation of a critical incident stress management team within the department and peer support team.
I think that's good work, really. And look, I've been a community advocate and an activist long before I've been an elected official, and so I've been to and organized protests against police brutality. I still think the Victor White III suicide, I call it the Houdini suicide, because how you kill yourself with your hands cuffed behind your back, But I like what you're saying, Chief, because I'm quite sure there are some brothers in law enforcement that had they been in a better place. Now, some people just, they're hateful and malicious. And you'll find that in any industry. But I'm glad to hear that there's some self-care going on for brothers who truly have a heart to serve and be able to be their best person to serve.
Yeah, I've been talking, I'm gonna say, but let me, this topic, because I know we're talking about that on this.
Okay.
It's even more challenging now, but there are a lot of police officers that are hurting. We just had a team that just came down here. I apologize for not knowing their name, but they're police officers from all across the country who came to meet with our office to talk, and they've been going around the country doing that for police departments.
Okay.
Because what has happened is social media has made the world so small, and there are a lot of police officers who are feeling that law enforcement is not appreciated, that there's this fear of
like
making
educators.
mistakes and you're going to be judged. We have to have those conversations. Now, look, some of that may not necessarily be going on here. We haven't had protests, violent protests. We haven't had riots or anything like that in the city of Baton Rouge. when we see that in other places in law enforcement, and that's all the media talks about,
Sure.
you know, family members at home, you know, we talk about how families were scared that police officers were going to catch the COVID and bring it home to their family members, especially those who had pre-existing conditions. So we had to make changes within our own policies and procedures early on to limit exposure from the department, and at the same time try to provide public service to the community. So yeah, this post George Floyd era right now in policing is really challenging on top of the COVID, and we could talk about that more, but I'm gonna be quiet for a little while.
All right, thank you. Thank you for sharing. And you really did educate me on what's happening in BRPD in terms of training and policy changes. And, you know, change does take time. That's not to excuse anything drastic that has happened or may happen while we on this, you know, panel discussion. But I appreciate that we're making some amount of change in the right direction. So thank you on that. And I look forward to hearing Dr. Hicks, because I'm really excited about what he has to talk about. So you ready to share your screen?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, if you've given me screen sharing, I want to pitch something to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's on.
Screen sharing.
Yeah, but now you emailed it to me too. So if you don't get it, I'll do it on my end.
Now, how about this? Can you see this group of men?
Yes. We are good to go.
Yes, we have a line of civilians,
okay,
people from the neighborhood in the front, and a line of police in the back.
Okay.
And so I want to pitch this model of community policing because it's proven to be best practices coming from the data. And I'd like you guys to critique. Let's critique this model and see if it works here in the South. So what we have is this is a model of the theory based on unarmed civilian protectors. And this works throughout the UN in war-torn areas. Let's say that you're in Syria and you've got to go shopping. Some of these men from the community will walk you. Usually they have a white helmet on and they walk you to go get your groceries and back. Or let's say that you need to go to your car after a late meeting at 8 o'clock at night and you're in an unsafe neighborhood, whether it's a gated neighborhood and you're dark skinned or it's a dark urban neighborhood and you don't feel safe. These unarmed civilian protectors will escort you to the car. And what's different here is this is a second additional layer of policing. So you know how we talk about defund the police? What they really mean is employ this first layer of men from the community as official representatives of the force that's standing behind these men. And so by defund, they mean increase employment, engage the community in policing. And these men know the community. So they know that the CD man is not up to anything, but they know he's carrying too.
Okay.
And they don't even need to call the men in the back unless they think it's escalating, because their job is to de-escalate. Now you've heard about the, what do they call the red angels, guardian angels in New York City, ride in the subway. Yeah, that was about 3 decades ago. Guardian angels ride in the subway. They were not deputized, but they were trained. They were trained in how they can respond to things that are going on in the city. And so these guardian angels had a uniform, and people on the subway knew, don't act up when they're around because they'll call the police on you and they will hold you till the police come. So we're not talking about vigilantes at all. Here, let me show you another picture. Let me see if I can put this other picture up.
Because
show
that
you
particular one is in response to an
Freddie Gray.
event or, okay.
Freddie Gray in Baltimore.
Oh, okay.
Freddie
Okay,
Gray in
okay,
Baltimore.
okay.
The unarmed civilian protectors, the regular police force that we would call the militarized police.
Okay,
They don't know any of these people. They don't live here.
okay,
These men live in the neighborhood and they know everybody.
okay.
Okay, so what we're talking about is something like what we might see in Great Britain, a force, an additional layer of policing. All they have is a vest, a radio, and a video with a cap, and that's it. And they just walk around the neighborhood. They look like this man here, and everybody knows them. I mean, not with the hat though. Forget the hat. But everybody knows them, and they are members of the community. What does this do for you? Number one, it gets community engagement, because what's happening in the community is the people in the community are saying, I'm not helping the police, because if I help the police, I'm gonna get in trouble. My family's gonna get is at jeopardy if I help the police, because snitches get stitches, and they're gonna get the wrong person anyway. And somebody from my neighborhood who's innocent may end up getting hurt or imprisoned. And so the civilian police protectors or police force, they're unarmed, and what they're going to do is both work with individuals and the community to humanize the, the management of communities. There are lots of people who would like a safer community. Okay, there's lots of people who would like to see a little bit of right sizing.
Even the people in the hood want to see a safer community,
That's right.
huh?
Those are
Everybody ain't robbing each other.
the people in the hood is what I'm talking about. They want a safe community so they can walk to get their groceries, so their daughter can walk to school if they have to. But they know calling the police is not going to help. It's only going to escalate. So we have a force that knows how to de-escalate, and it helps to humanize the people in the neighborhood. And it's protection for those people who do want to be nonviolent protesters, just like you saw in Baltimore. They stand between the police and the protesters, and they're protecting the activists in the community. They protect the communities from the drug and gang crowd, and they have monitoring, and they have telephones. The radios that help them to call out any amount of force that they need in time. Everybody lowers their risk. So this is a public health intervention that's been proven in Chicago. Used to be Murder City, and that is black on black crime. And this solves one of our other political issues, that every time we talk about police brutality, people yell back, black on black crime. Why are you not worried about that? But we are. And this model addressed all that. It addresses black on black crime. It addresses a gradual and layers of police force, from community policing to coercive policing. And it's clear about this says right here that we prevent violence, we increase safety, we strengthen the local police, the peacemaking infrastructure. Okay, we develop the capacity, and this is where that defund the police. What they mean is increase the capacity for community policing by hiring an entire new layer. These police monitor the neighborhood and call for help if they need it, but they also have rumor control. If you heard all the police that shot somebody, the community police, the unarmed civilian protectors, can come out and say, I was just there, nobody got shot, everything's all right. They do ceasefire monitoring. If you have a ceasefire, they help to maintain it. And you get early warning responses, so that there's some cities that have devices that listen for gunshots. Automatically, they'll dispatch the community policing. But let's look at the engagement. It's proactive engagement, because these people are unafraid to position themselves between people who are in a conflict. Everybody knows each other. They'll come right out and walk right in the middle and de-escalate because they're trained. They don't have to worry about what if it escalates. They entirely de-escalate. They're protective in that they will walk people where they need to go, and that keeps eyes and ears in the community. So these unarmed civilian protectors are a protective presence without being inflammatory. Here's one other thing that they do. Nobody's coming to save these communities that have been disinvested. Nobody's coming to save them. And so this gives confidence back in the community that we can police ourselves. In fact, we can govern ourselves, and it builds that confidence and that investment in the community. And then you can track your statistics. And I'm sure as Principal Wright has seen, the statistics will show a tremendous response to a de-escalation, a demilitarization, and a community engagement where we use restorative justice rather than punitive justice, whereas that's the only hammer we have, or the only tool we have is a hammer. And so this unarmed civilian protectors has been tried all over the world in even much worse war zones than we have now. It's been proven and written up in peer-reviewed articles by Gary Sutkin. And there's money for it. If we wanted to try this in a zip code, the unarmed civilian protectors, and I want to say that if Baton Rouge gets this right, we're on the map. There will be people coming from everywhere to look at our model. If we get it right, that puts the United States back into a good standing with the rest of the civilized world that says everybody doesn't need to have a gun to resolve conflict. So now I would like you to, let's talk about this model and see if we can tear it apart. What does it take to make this happen?
Is that an open-ended question?
Yes.
Oh, well, you mentioned funding, and I was going to ask you. So you say funding. So, is it something that grant makers are funding?
Yes. There are many grants because this is a public health problem.
Okay.
So you not only have law enforcement grants that are beginning to overlap with behavioral health and public health, because you can't expect the police to do all this. Right. It's not reasonable. Police have enough problems. I mean, I don't know how they carry all the gear. So yes, we collaborate with healthcare and education and corrective services, including juvenile.
I mean, so, full disclosure, my personality is one, and my mother says all the time, I was trying to tie my shoes at 2, and I didn't need help learning how to potty let's be clear, I said I didn't need help learning how to potty because even though I was too short to get up there myself, I was determined, So full disclosure, like something like this personally turns me on because I'm all about, okay, how can we do what we need to do for ourselves as a community? And
so as a community, we need to increase employment because unemployment causes civil unrest. Yeah. The wealth gap causes civil unrest.
Yes.
As a community, we know we need to learn a new model for conflict resolution. Mm-hmm. And we have that. And it works from any age, from K through 12, college, and adults. So this helps moms and dads, police and mayors, to everybody to resolve conflict.
So
the Chief, money is there.
Let me ask you this. Because he mentioned that it's something that they've done in Chicago and Baltimore as a practitioner, for lack of better terms, or as a chief, that chiefs talk to each other. Y'all do conferences or workshops and stuff like that. Familiar with these particular ones or any others? And what are some pros and cons that you've heard of from your vantage point as somebody that that is law enforcement?
So first, let me say, now I've been very outspoken about this since I've been in this position, that if we want true change, it's not going to come from a law enforcement leader, or it's an unrealistic expectation that it's going to come from the community. You know, when I look at what we're faced with the crime issues here, with all the challenges, the community piece, I believe, is the one I'm most excited about from a long-term standpoint, because Baton Rouge, specifically, people are sticking tied, and you're seeing it. So I appreciate the presentation. I think if you would look at what the mayor put out with her safe and hopeful and healthy BR, a lot of the things that he's recommending, she's touching on. Okay. You know, that community, you know, which we refer to part of it as violence interrupters, peacemakers, they're different versions. I first learned about it when I read a book called Bleeding Out. It's Bleeding Out. If you want to go read it, it touches on that. Courtney Scott in the mayor's office is leading that public health response approach to crime in Baton Rouge. And a lot of things he's talking about, from establishing an office within the mayor's office on neighborhood safety and engagement, where you will have individuals in the community, what we call credible individuals. A lot of our shooting incidents are gang or group related, also have narcotics nexus. This would be what we call credible individuals in the community. Young folks are going to listen. Some of them are, you know, ex-recovering persons, individuals who've gotten their life together. Some are business owners, some who spend time and learn their lessons, and they want to help mentor. So one part is identifying them. There's also a social work piece to it, and not just social working piece where we are, you know, responding. We just got a grant. I got it on Friday. Okay. Thursday, Friday. Our social workers will be riding with law enforcement officers to respond to a cause of what we call EDP, third persons, and that is to complement our Bridge Center for Hope, that are going to be having a response team to respond with professionals, trained professionals, with those who are suffering from mental illness, but also engaging social workers at emergency rooms, because we know that when there's shooting incidents and there's trauma and emotions, there's what we call this retaliation, and we see this. Today's a shooting victim who survives can be tomorrow's suspect in another shooting or homicide. So it's having social workers and violence interrupters at emergency rooms to work with family members and help them manage those emotions. There's also a behavior health piece to it, but also a task force of members to advise the government on public health approaches to violence, just like you're doing. So I believe the mayor kicked this off last month when we were all in the room and we were talking about these ideas. So it's good to hear talk about it, because a lot of these ideas are community focused. And I think it's a great recommendation.
So you said safe, hopeful,
healthy BR, safe, hopeful, healthy BR.
Because I'm familiar with healthy BR, but I will admit, I don't pretend I know something I didn't know. I will admit that I wasn't familiar with this more recent development. You saying it was the past, what, month? When y'all, tell me again, say it again. You just said it, I'm sorry.
You talking about the name of the initiative?
Yes.
It's safe?
No, when y'all were talking, you said y'all were talking about the community.
Yeah, we did a walk. We had a Stop the Violence a march in the community. It was we were there with community leaders. NAACP was there. Butterfly Society. 100 Black Men. There were so many elected officials were there, and we marched, stop the violence, and we, we had that march. It was a follow up with the mayor had another initiative where community folks from about every from faith-based to community leaders, educators, we all met and we were in group sessions and we talked about what we can do, you know, different stakeholders. And the mayor announced this initiative where funds were already being identified to help get this program started, where we're taking a public health approach to prevent. It's all about prevention. All about prevention.
Now was it a similar model, or was the term community policing used generically? I'm just curious.
Nah, I think community policing is just one portion of that model. I mean, it's just one.
I'm gonna have to go check it out, because I do admit that I'm familiar with the Healthy BR, but I admit that I didn't. I saw that particular event and wasn't able to make it.
Yeah.
And I should have followed up on the content of the event. So I appreciate you sharing that.
So let me tell you a little bit more about what this is saying. That Healthy BR is down here. Healthy BR is when we have individuals who are at peace trying to eat more vegetables. And Syria, and so you're not gonna have so much violence and criminality when everyone is trying to grow their own vegetable garden and get their kids to school. This is Healthy BR. Syria is up here, where you're in a war zone, Chicago, the Skid Row. That's where you could get shot just walking down the street. And so in between is what we're talking about in Baton Rouge. And I also want to add that whether you're in education, K through 12, higher education, municipal government, whether you're in any of these systems, healthcare. Like in healthcare, we had a terrible reputation. They said that doctors were taking off the wrong leg, that doctors were taking out women's uterus when they they hadn't even had kids yet. They were sterilizing Black women. Doctors had a terrible reputation, and we came under the same kind of scrutiny and the same kind of outrage that the law enforcement is now. And so regardless of what we're talking about, the topic is policies for these large institutions and how to have justice taught, modeled, and produced in these large institutions: education, healthcare, policing, and government. And so the culture, as you mentioned, trumps the policy. So whatever solution you have has to include modeling a nonviolent and de-escalating culture. We change from debates to dialogue, as my friend would say. We want to do dialogue, not debates. And in that way, we can all use our creativity. We can all participate to make a better community, whether it's policing or schools or hospitals or whatever.
And so as I give each of you an opportunity to just give some feedback or some thought as to your response to different things each of us shared. I also want people who are attendees, whether you're on Zoom or you're watching on Facebook, if you have some questions, go ahead and plug them in, and we'll pick them up as they come in, as folks respond to some of the things shared. Sister Wright, I'm thinking about that connection, that school to prison pipeline connection, and how you mentioned sometimes what's going on in communities is just as much of a burden when the child is in the family is interacting or engaged in education. And so I'm wondering your thoughts on the concept of community policing, whether it's that particular model that he mentioned or another model, but you might know of, or the idea of community neighborhoods feeling more empowered to address what's going on in their own neighborhoods.
No, I have had an opportunity to study, or should I say, read about community policing. I remember when Chief Paul first came, I was at a church that he spoke at, and I was there going, oh my God, this is going to be awesome. Because he spoke a lot about, even at that time, he may not have used the words community policing, but that's where he was going, even at that time. And restorative practices, I'm listening to him and I'm saying, if they do half of what he's saying, we're gonna be okay. So honestly, that's what I was thinking at the time. And this has been, I know, 2-3 years ago. So I'm encouraged that we can get something. I don't know the different models, because I do know that there are different models in different areas for community policing. I don't know what model is the best model for Baton Rouge. I'm not that up on the different models, but I can say that I think that we need to make an effort to see what is going to work in Baton Rouge. I do know that our students deserve it. I know that our neighborhoods deserve it. Our parents, the community itself, we all deserve that opportunity to see Baton Rouge become that city that can be on the map to say we're doing something positive.
Any other thoughts? Brother Taylor, did you have any thoughts or vision of, Sister Jane Chandler would like to have the contact info for Dr. Hicks for follow-up. Say again.
Yes, we'll share all of our contact information. But yes, we need to, Jamal, I'll let you go, but I'm ready to call the vote. I'm ready to call the vote. Now you're having a surgeon in me come out.
So thank you for following up with me, Dawn. I appreciate that. And, I'm going to attend to your question in a different way. And, you know, I hope that you realize when you added me on here, I was going to
Look, I'm bracing myself. Look.
I heard a couple of things tonight that I find interesting, and I want to deal with them from the perspective or lens of somebody that has been in this work of activism and protesting. And I'm going to talk about the collective us as it relates to policing. And so I'm going to start with a very short piece of a story that I heard recently about Mr. Green, because I think it's important. And then I want to juxtapose that with what I heard. So Ronald Green was stopped by state troopers. Car pushed off the road. I'm sorry. He was tased, I think, approximately 4 times. He was drug out of his car and thrown onto his stomach. And then they took flashlights and beat him in the head. He pleaded for his life and said, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And still they left him face down and he died. And so when I hear stuff like police have trauma, or stuff like not everybody in a uniform is bad, I'm troubled. It does something to me because we are so forgiving to a system. Because listen, there are no blue lives. There's no such thing. Children don't come out blue. They're either black or white, or Indian, or Native American. But there's no such thing as a blue life. And so I agree that we don't have bad police officers, that we have police officers that are not bad. But I also think that as a people, we consistently look for a solution and forgive what has not yet been atoned for. And so when I hear the comments that I heard tonight, I'm a little disturbed or troubled because I think that it goes a step too far to first expect a group of people that are frustrated with the circumstances that they've been forced to live under. And then here, we should look for a solution of forgiveness when first people have not atoned. And by that, I mean, you have people protesting because you wouldn't leave a dog face down in the dirt to die and drag them by the chains on their feet. And so when we have this conversation about policing, we must first deal with the fact, and I was taking notes the whole time so that I wouldn't blow up my head when we road. But when we talk about this idea of policing, this idea of, like I heard she said, oh, we have an internal affairs department, that's part and parcel of the problem. You don't let people police themselves, because then you end up with situations like Ronald Green, where the police officer that killed him remained on the road for 17 months and was never arrested. We need an external affairs department, right? Like, I think that there's some room for solution, but we need to look at this through the lens of the hurt that people have. And that's not to knock Chief. Listen, I've heard some wonderful things about what he's done for policing in Baton Rouge. Don't get me wrong, but I also don't want to get on a call and inflate someone's ego or hear about what Sharon Weston Broom did, because guess what? The solutions have not been there, are not there yet. And so I'm not in a broken ego.
So if it's okay
so
for me
no. Let me, I'm going to defend my own honor here, Mr. Jamal, because we were talking about one thing. Okay, and look, I respect what you're saying and all of that, and here's my position on this. I think that since I've been here, I've spent over 28 years in a profession that I recognize as imperfect, but I wouldn't sit here and say that we haven't had some individuals who don't deserve to wear this badge terminated. I've seen them, but I can speak to what's going on in the Baton Rouge Police Department. And let me say this: I get it that there are systems out there that need to change, but you know, I'm not going to be criticized for standing up for the good men and women who wear uniform. Yeah, so they have good men and women, and let me tell you something. I also am just as passionate about some of the same systems, some of the bad policing that I, in my life experience, and if you were the chief of police, that I've shared. So when you begin to paint all us with this broad brush, hold on a second, Chief, and all our integrity, I just don't think that's fair, Jamal.
Wait. If I could interject just a little bit between the two of y'all, let me just say this: I did not perceive the conversation or any statement that anyone made as saying there's a solution, this particular thing is going to solve the problem. I didn't even say forgive, or even though as a spiritual matter you have to forgive. That doesn't mean forget, that doesn't mean excuse, that doesn't mean dismiss. I in no shape, form, or fashion. Well, but I didn't perceive that this panel discussion was any attempt to pretend like there should be no atonement. I don't personally take that opinion.
But Dawn, let me jump in, because here's what happened. I listened, and I'm intentional about my listening. I heard somebody talk for about 20 minutes, another person talk for about 15. And then when I said something that people were uncomfortable with, then they had to jump in to defend themselves. No,
I'm not trying to defend myself. I'm just telling you.
No, hold on. Listen to the thought that I'm making here.
Okay.
So though I'm interested in what the chief of police of Baton Rouge is saying, he's not the chief of police of the United States. And so what I'm saying in my commentary is, I have seen some wonderful things out of Baton Rouge. However, I'm not going to be lectured on what my position is as an activist. And so when we have a conversation or a disagreement of opinion, we need to be able to think and listen and hear what people have to say. Because what just happened was I listened to people talk for 20 minutes apiece, And then when I said
Okay.
something that made people uncomfortable, they were unable to hear and listen. And so what I would say is, what we need to think about as we deal with this issue of policing in this country is realize that Black people are getting killed. They're getting killed in a way that's inappropriate. And I don't want to hear anything about the trauma of police without it being coupled with the trauma of Black people in communities getting killed, without it being coupled with the trauma and realization that our communities are underfunded. And so, unfortunately,
Okay. Okay,
a
that's a fair point. Okay, okay, but and I don't.
Well, can I
And
ask Jamal a question? Jamal, can we have both of those conversations? Do you think it's fair? Because I hear you what you're saying, but do you think it's fair to have those conversations on both sides? Like you can't have one and not have the other?
I think we can. I think we can have both conversations. I think what I'm saying is, at the point that I made the juxtaposition after listening to what I thought was about 20 minutes of conversation, I think your response was an attempt, even though I said I think policing in Baton Rouge is going really well and looks different than it looks across the state, I think you took offense to it. And so I'm not going to apologize for what I said. I think that we need to be prepared to have the difficult conversation of the negative impact on policing in our Black community. I think that you've begun that work in Baton Rouge. Unfortunately, you're not the chief of police everywhere, Chief. There's some places that this is done really badly. There's places like Lafayette that this is done horribly. And so what I would say to you is, if we listen and hear each other long enough, I think that there are solutions. And I think that that goes to what Dr. Hicks was saying about dialogue. I'm not going to feel okay as a Black man in this country about policing until there is some very systemic change. And I don't think we can continue to wait. And so the question I have for you, Chief, is, do you think your colleagues in this state, up to and including state police, have put the best foot forward for the best of your police department and colleagues in uniform in the department you lead?
So I know that there are efforts going on right now as we speak. Those efforts are being led at our state legislative task force that was, that was put together to look at changes in policing. So a lot of things that you're talking about, systems, a lot of the training requirements. I know the Baton Rouge Police Department did a presentation on some of those changes that we've made in the police department, the areas of reform. I know that Louisiana Sheriff's Association, Louisiana Chiefs of Police Association, several activists, very well spoken and passionate, just like you are, Jamal, and don't necessarily have a favorable opinion of the police department. You know, in fact, we just had, and I don't know how long I don't know if we have some yet, but all this week and last week we had community citizens, leaders, faith-based come and talk to our training academy. And I purposely picked people who didn't necessarily like us, or like policing. I wanted and this is our training academy, they graduate next week. And I wanted to hear from people like you. I wanted to hear from other people who have life experience. So they got a very diverse understanding of the Baton Rouge community. There's some love us, some don't like us, some think we're doing okay, some love us today, don't love us tomorrow, and some just got so much hurt and pain because of how we policed them for so long. It's gonna take a minute before we get there, and we may never get there with some of them because we hurt them so bad. So we've allowed them to come speak to our new trainees. And my mindset is, I want you to see this is who we have to police everybody. Those who like us don't, and our expectation is you're going to be a professional at all times, even when provoked. So I say that to say this. We've had those conversations at the session. I am prayerful and that those who are in the decision making from a legislative standpoint are going to make some changes. Will they make all the changes that may satisfy what you're looking at? I don't know. I really don't. But I'm prayerful that that there will be some change that will move us in the right direction as it relates to policing in Louisiana. So look, we will see how that legislation comes out, but I'm prayerful. And the reason why I say that, because I hope that those who are involved in that process see that this generation, I'm not talking about the Murphy Paul. I'm not talking, well, there's only 2 young people I see on here. That's Miss Wright and Collins. Those 2 guys look old like me, but I say that to say this younger generation, they're not as patient as we are. What they're saying is we should have got it right 2 years ago. We should have got it right, when it happened in New York, when it happened in LA, when it happened in all these other places. And I'm just telling you, these young people, I feel in part that we have not done our part as particularly as let's just say that they're not as patient as we are. And if it continues to happen, those protests that we see in other places are going to be even more and more, because people are tired and communities are tired. And that was just the straw that broke the camel's back. And that with George Floyd, like, I get that. I am prayerful. I'm not going to speak on those. I'm prayerful that the legislation is listening and that you're going to see change coming out from that task force. I'm optimistic.
Well, we are at 7:32. I appreciate you all. Again, with system change, sometimes that requires, well, not sometimes, it does require acknowledging, and as a country, we have a tendency not to acknowledge the root or the foundation of some of our ills, which is why I have a great concern over folks trying to say racism doesn't exist, etc., or that, or forgetting the whole history of how police departments were established in their original purpose and intent. When we don't acknowledge those things, it's very hard to, and don't acknowledge how it, it's passed down from generation to generation, whether it's in policy or not, because we've not addressed those things. And so it's a huge lift for us as a society to lift. I'm glad to hear of the few things I was not aware of, because it's a start, and I see it, and I do understand it only as a start. That could easily be stopped or reversed. And so we have to keep pushing. I thank all of my panelists for every moment, even our little,
That was love. What you talking about? That was love.
You know I'm a troublemaker.
It was.
Said you ain't gonna never invite me back here. She like,
nah.
oh, God, this troublemaker, he ain't never come.
You told me you was crazy before we even had this going on, so I'm good. I'm good.
That's why I need some restorative practice after this call. Okay.
Yeah.
Nah, John, let me tell you, you need to see me and my uncle them talk, okay? And my family, my uncles, they are truck drivers, and so that was nothing.
Well, Dawn,
Uh-huh.
please invite me back anytime you have Chief Paul. He called me young. I take it.
Hey, me too.
Look, Jamal is the oldest guy on this here call. Trust me, okay? Jamal is old.
I know my 30-year-old daughter is watching going, Mommy, please don't. She's 30 and I know she's on here. I'm good with it.
Oh, Chief Paul, Sister Jane Chandler is asking, is that on the website, the information about the Mayor's Safe Community Initiative?
Yeah, she Googled it. I think Courtney Scott is putting it together right now. I know they're working on that plan, but announcement was worked. Funding was identified. And that was announced in a press conference that we did over there at the BREC facility, the main BREC facility.
Okay. Well, thank y'all again. I won't hold y'all because I have an 8 o'clock that I have to get to myself. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate all of you, well, contact me directly. If you're watching on Facebook, just inbox me from my page. If you didn't get some information or need to follow up with somebody, hit me up. All right, thanks y'all.
All right, thank you. God bless y'all.
We're gonna say,
Appreciate it.
we're gonna
All
say
right.
Keep up
vote
the good
on
work in Baton
3.
Rouge, Chief.
We're gonna say
All right,
vote
Jamal.
on 3. Vote on 3. Ready? Vote. 1,
1, 2, 3.
On 3. Ready? Vote.
Vote.
1, 2, 3.
Vote.
Vote.
Oh, wait, do it again because I was
Vote.
Go out and vote, right?
Vote. Yes.
Vote.
yeah. Oh, vote.
Right.
Vote.
Okay, I'm sorry, I
That's right.
can't hear.
All right,
Okay.
Doc.
Be
All
blessed.
right. God bless.
Bless.